Welcome in, everybody, to the Simone NBA Show. We are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and I think TikTok. I think we're going to try that too, but this is the first one, so I'm not going to lie, I'm probably winging it a little bit, but we're going to start off with what has taken over the NBA world at this point, and that is Kevin Durant and the Boston Celtics. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, in the late hours of the night, deciding to drop a bomb on the NBA world, saying that the Celtics have emerged as a potential landing spot for Durant and have engaged in NBA talks. You've heard the rumors that, those talks are old. You've heard some saying those talks are new. You've heard, Brooklyn is shaking things up. They are trying to re-spark the trade market for Durant, so they leak these rumors, and the Celtics probably aren't too happy about it, and I can't blame them, but we're here. This is where everything is at the moment, and it puts the Celtics in a bit of a tricky situation, right? The Celtics don't have to do anything. The Celtics are one of the best teams in the NBA already. They added Brogdon and Gallinari this offseason, trading Jaylen Brown, who would be the centerpiece of the deal, and reportedly, Shams Charania of The Athletic reported that they offered Brown, White, and a first for Durant. Nets said no. They want Smart and more than one first. Celtics said no, and that's where they're at. For Celtics blog, I wrote about how it's the quote-unquote what else that matters for the Celtics, in the sense that you probably don't want to give up Smart because he's obviously better than Derek White, Defensive Player of the Year, key part of Boston's success. You definitely don't want to give up Robert Williams because him and Brown is just too much for almost anybody. And you'd be blowing up a championship core that was 2 wins away from bringing Banner 18 to the Celtics. So, from the perspective of the Celtics, they don't really have to do anything, right? If you don't trade for Durant, you're still a title contender. If you do trade for Durant, you're, I guess, a better title contender with a shorter championship window. So those are the things you have to consider. From my perspective, I don't necessarily think the Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant. I think you keep that window and move on, but you also have to consider Jaylen Brown will never be as good as Kevin Durant, probably, unless he has some miraculous 5th, 6th year jump that takes him to be one of the 10 best players of all time, which seems unlikely. He won't be as good as KD. KD right now, on my personal rankings at least, is the second best player in the world. Jaylen Brown is probably sitting around 20, 25 maybe. It's tough to say. So you have to consider those things at the very least, because Kevin Durant is better. And if you'd rather the longer window, then you stay with Jaylen. If you'd rather a better chance of winning right now, you probably lean KD. But the Celtics don't have to do anything. The Nets' best offer available is probably a JB package. So if you're the Nets, you'd want Brown from the Celtics over anything else. But if it plays out how it's looking like, the Nets would be forced to take a Jaylen Brown, Derek White, maybe 2 picks from the Celtics, unless, the Raptors decide they want to offer Scotty Barnes, unless the Heat decide they want to offer Bam Adebayo, unless the Suns decide they are fine with giving up Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton once he can even be traded, because he just got signed to a new contract, so that's not available on the market right now for the Nets. So there's all these things you have to consider. From the Celtics, I don't think they should do it, but if they do, it's hard for me to sit here and say, the Celtics are awful now. No, because they'll be a better team, just Kevin Durant. But giving up that window definitely hurts them. But that's that situation. Definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. Will the Celtics make the trade that blows up the NBA world? Who knows? Will they have to give up Marcus Smart? Who knows? But keep an eye on that. It's going to be interesting. Celtics probably the top landing spot for KD now. On top of that, Shams reported a bunch of teams are interested in Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, you heard the rumors and all the rumblings. The New York Knicks are the top spot. They are the top team for Donovan Mitchell. They can offer the best package, but Shams put out a pretty lengthy list of teams that could be interested in Donovan Mitchell. Along with the Knicks, the Washington Wizards, Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors, Charlotte Hornets, Sacramento Kings, and Atlanta Hawks. Out of those teams, how many can put together a reasonable package for Mitchell? That's a slightly different question. But in terms of teams that are interested, that's a fun list, right? You look at the Heat and the Raptors, those are probably the top teams who could put together the best packages. You're talking about Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson picks from Miami. You're talking about OG Anunoby picks from the Raptors. I don't think they throw Gary Trent in there, but maybe you throw Gary Trent in there. Maybe it's Gary Trent, Precious Achiuwa, and picks. You could figure something out there. The other 4 teams are where things get a little more interesting because you could probably Atlanta could probably put together a pretty convincing package, but the question then becomes, how would Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, and DeJounte Murray fit together on the court? Because that seems pretty suspicious. But you could put together a package of John Collins and picks, or DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka Okongwu and picks, or whatever they're comfortable giving up. But then again, the Hawks don't have many picks left because they traded them off for Murray, so that's where things kind of fall apart, considering Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz are fiending for picks after the Rudy Gobert trade. The Kings don't really have much either. I mean, they could put together a few picks, maybe Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell, unless they think they'd want to trade Fox for Donovan Mitchell, which seems also kind of weird, trading their 2-star point guards in 2 years. So I don't think the Kings would have much to say about it. The Wizards could make things a little bit interesting. You're talking, I guess, maybe like Will Barton once he gets off the recently traded restriction, or Kyle Kuzma, and then like Hachimura, Denny Avdija, Corey Kispert, and picks, and they have a decent amount of picks, so maybe that's something you could work with. But out of all of them, I think the most intriguing team on the list is probably the Hornets, outside of Miami and Toronto, because I think those are the top 2 spots because they're contending status. The Hornets took a step back this offseason thanks to, circumstances beyond their control, which we're not going to talk about here. Trading for Donovan Mitchell would make them a playoff team again, right? LaMelo Ball, Donovan Mitchell would probably be somewhat suspect on the defensive end, but as a backcourt, it would be fun, right? You have Steve Clifford in there again, so there'll be a decent defensive scheme at the very least, whether or not you have the pieces. But you put together a trade package. I wrote one up for Hoops Habit the other day. You put together a package of Terry Rozier, PJ Washington, James Bouknight, Kai Jones, 3 or 4 first-round picks, maybe 5 if you really want to push it. And then we're talking, right? You compare that offer to however many picks the Knicks are willing to offer, plus Obi Toppin, Quentin Grimes, I guess Emmanuel Quickley, and Fournier. Like, Danny Ainge loves himself some Terry Rozier. James Bouknight and Kai Jones are 2 very young pieces. And at this point, which team is going to be better, the Hornets or the Knicks? That's a real question, right? Like if you're the Jazz, you have to consider, what team do we think is going to be better if they get Donovan Mitchell? Is it RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, or is it LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, Donovan Mitchell? Like which core do you trust better? They're probably pretty close to the same level, but like that's a genuine argument you have to consider. And if you think the Hornets would be a worse team than that Knicks team, then you probably make the trade with the Hornets, right? Like, you probably want those picks over the other ones. Hornets don't have their 2023 pick. They would have the Nuggets 2023 pick, so that'd be probably not as good. And the Knicks can offer more picks, but it's not about how many picks the Knicks can offer. It's about how many picks the Knicks are willing to offer. And I'll put it out there. If I'm the Knicks, I just make the trade. Like, I say, okay, Danny Ainge, you can have your 6 first-round picks. You can have Obi Toppin. You can have Quentin Grimes, Miles McBride, Evan Fournier. You'd probably want to hold on to one of Emmanuel Quickley or Quentin Grimes, Miles McBride. Like, you want to hold on to one of those just so you have some guard depth and some youth to back your team on. But from the Knicks' perspective, getting Donovan Mitchell makes you a bona fide playoff contender. And after they got to the playoffs that one year and then flopped the very next season, you want to get back there, especially in a market like New York. And then you've heard the rumors and the rumblings of, if they get Donovan Mitchell, they're going to look probably to trade Julius Randle, if anything, to open up cap space for next season to build around Mitchell, Brunson, and RJ Barrett, which is a really good core, right? Brunson at the 1, Mitchell at the 2, Barrett at the 3. That's a great starting spot for your franchise. You can argue Brunson's overpaid. You pay for talent in the NBA nowadays. I don't really have too much of a problem with that contract. He showed a lot of potential last year with Dallas. So I think you consider, and the trade that was out there is Julius Randle for Russell Westbrook. From the Knicks side of things, that's essentially saying we want the cap flexibility moving forward. Give us probably Westbrook in a first, I would assume. And obviously Lakers have plenty of other things to think about, but it'd probably be Westbrook in a first for Julius Randle, I would assume. I don't think either side could get much more out of the deal. You could say, I mean, if they really wanted to clear space and they traded Rose to the Jazz instead of Fournier in a Mitchell trade, you could do Fournier and Randle, for Westbrook, a first and like a second or two, which also wouldn't be bad. It would give the Knicks even more flexibility, which would be great for them. And then the Lakers have LeBron James, Evan Fournier, Julius Randle, Anthony Davis. That's probably close to a top team in the West, although we don't really know what's going on in LA nowadays. Anything can happen there. And from the Lakers' perspective, I think your top priority is getting Kyrie from the Nets still, and that wraps back around to the whole KD Celtics things. Like, when will the Nets make a deal for Kevin Durant? Because that's when you'll probably see the floodgates open, on a potential Kyrie Irving trade. And that's where the Lakers want to get involved, right? If you can get a third team in there, you throw Westbrook in a first or two to the Nets, Talon Horton-Tucker, bring back Kyrie Irving, send Westbrook. I mean, there could probably be a 3-team trade in there to be made. But then at that point, the Knicks aren't really giving up Julius Randle, so that's another problem. Unless they wanted to give them to the Nets, like, would the Nets rather have Julius Randle's rehabbing contract? I mean, that's a question. I didn't really think about that till now. Like, you could probably draw up some sort of 3-man trade, and this, again, all depends on... Let's do this. Let's say the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell in a trade, and let's say the Celtics get Kevin Durant in a trade. We'll just make those hypotheticals for now. Would the Knicks, Lakers, and Nets be able to do something along the lines of... Because the Nets don't want Westbrook's contract. We saw that in a report from Mark Stein. They don't want Westbrook's contract. That's probably holding this back. Let's say the Lakers get Fournier and Kyrie Irving. The Nets would get Julius Randle, and they'd also have Jaylen Brown. So there's a decent 2-man punch right there, right? Like, that's a solid core already. Nets get Julius Randle. And probably a pick, I would assume. The Knicks get Russell Westbrook, a pick, in a couple seconds. I don't know if that works financially. You'd probably have to, mess with it a little bit. But that could be a 3-team deal we could see works. Whether or not Westbrook suits up for the Knicks, I don't know, because that's a lot of guards. But, they could buy him out. They could wait it out. This is just so they have flexibility moving forward to build around that Mitchell, Brunson, Barrett core. That could be something that's somewhat interesting. Obviously, Lakers also have this whole Buddy Hield, Miles Turner thing with the Pacers that they have to deal with. If the Kyrie thing doesn't work out, I think it's pretty clear at this point that the Kyrie trade is their top priority. And the Hield Turner option is on the back burner. But if they did want to make that trade, it's there. The thing right now is the Lakers are offering Westbrook in a first. Indiana wants 2 firsts. That's where it stalled. It goes back again to Rob Pelinka not being willing to offer that 2029 first to improve the team around LeBron, which at that point, why even have LeBron? Like, build a team around him to compete. He had a phenomenal season last year. Whether or not you think he's washed, Lakers are washed, blah, blah, blah. LeBron just put up 30 at 35, 30. I don't even know. 90 years old at this point, right? Like, you build around him and AD, that's going to be a title contender. Knicks get Donovan Mitchell. The Heat are kind of just floating around here in all of this. Like, they want KD, they want Donovan Mitchell, but they don't really have enough assets compared to other teams that are interested. I think the Raptors have the second best offer for KD even, so the Heat are kind of like way on the outskirts. If I'm the Nets, I'd take OG Anunoby, Gary Trent, Achua, and picks over Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, and I don't really think that's a problem. Like, Tyler Hero's great. He won 6th Man of the Year last year. I think he can be an all-star. But are you going to build a team around him? I don't really know about that. And you could say you can't really build a team around OG and Gary Trent either. But at that point, you're talking about 2 quality young pieces to take a chance on versus 1 in Duncan Robinson, who I'm not out on Duncan Robinson. I still think he can help a team very much, but you don't really want him to be the centerpiece of a rebuild by any means, right? He's more of a, okay, put him on a championship contender, help him win. That's where you see him. And the Nets just aren't going to be that. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. I think we're going to be waiting on Mitchell and KD trades before anything else really happens this offseason, which is frustrating, but also, I mean, exciting, I guess, if you want to put it in that perspective. Like, we're always going to be on edge waiting for the next thing to happen, which will be fun, but it's definitely annoying to, wait for it to finally play out. But that's kind of my thoughts on the whole trade thing. Mitchell, I think, will probably end up in New York. KD, if he gets traded, ends up in Boston. I'm still not sold that they should do it. I think they should keep Jaylen Brown, but that looks like the best offer, and it looks like it'd probably be JB Derek White 2 first. Maybe Peyton Pritchard, although I think that's probably borderline too much for the Celtics. As far as everything else going on, you've got some solid free agents available. The whole Colin Sexton situation is really weird too. I don't even really know what's going on there, to be honest. I've read some things, but it's all kind of like conflicting reports. The Cavaliers want to bring him back. There's real no market. He could go into training camp without a contract, which is crazy considering he averaged like 25 points 2 years ago. I never really got the knock on Colin Sexton. It's a lot of, he doesn't pass the ball, he's selfish, he only cares about himself, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look at what the Cavs did. He averaged 25 points on pretty good efficiency. Even if you bring him off the bench in Cleveland, he's still going to be one of the best 6 men in the league. I guess the issue is he probably wants to get paid. There's really no money left available. If I'm Sexton, I take the qualifying offer. I test my market on the, unrestricted free agent pool next year. And I think he could probably get 20 mil next season. I don't think there's enough money to get him 20 mil a season anywhere here. I think I saw a report that the Cavs were offering him that, but if he wants an increased role, he goes somewhere else. If he wants the long-term stability, I don't know if the Cavs are giving that to him, so that's definitely a weird one to look at. Another fun report we've seen is the Hornets' backup point guard situation, to stick with the Hornets after the Donovan Mitchell rumor. Kemba Walker, old faces, same places in Charlotte. They need a backup point guard right now. After LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier, they don't really have anything, right? Like they have Bryce McGowan, who they just signed. They have James Bouknight. Both those guys are more wings than point guards. Kemba Walker didn't play well, in New York last season. At least that's the narrative. Like if you look at his stats, he shot efficiently. He was fine. The defense isn't there. But if you're talking about Kemba Walker on a minimum contract in a backup role in Charlotte, that seems pretty risk-free, right? Like I don't know what would go wrong there, right? Like he wouldn't be playing 30 minutes a night. You'd be asking him to play 20 minutes a night behind LaMelo Ball. That's the perfect mentor in Charlotte for Ball. Reportedly, they're also looking to bring Isaiah Thomas back. At that point, hell, bring them both back, right? Neither of them have to get big-time minutes. Both would be great mentors for LaMelo Ball, and it would continue the tradition of the Charlotte Celtics, right? You'd have Rozier, Kemba, IT, Gordon Hayward, all on the Hornets. They're kind of just picking from the Celtics at this point, which is funny, although it's just a joke. But yeah, Kemba to the Hornets makes too much sense, I think, not to happen. That's probably where he'll end up. Other free agents on the markets, Carmelo Anthony is one, which is kind of surprising to see he doesn't have a deal yet. Obviously, he's getting up there in age. He's not a great defender, but he was a great three-point shooter for the Lakers last year, even though they were a mess. It wouldn't surprise me to see him just go back to LA on a deal. That's probably the most likely scenario that happens at this point. The Celtics, I guess, could get involved, but at that point, a minimum deal for him not to play many minutes. He'd be good wing depth for them. Other teams, just contenders, right? For Melo, obviously, like I said, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Warriors maybe would be a fine landing spot. They lost Otto Porter Jr., so they could look to bring Melo in as a bench piece. Sixers, just all the contenders. No need to run through them. The Heat would probably be one of the better spots too, because they lost PJ Tucker and need a starting small forward. So there's that as well. But and then there was another thing I wanted to bring up too, but I can't remember it. So Draymond Green and the Warriors. Yes. Draymond Green saying he wants/deserves a max contract from the Warriors. The Warriors showed the first sign of hesitancy, he said, struggling to get the words out, to spend on the roster this summer. They let Gary Payton and Otto Porter walk in free agency when they could have brought them both back, but they brought in cheaper options in Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green. That was the first real sign of, okay, we don't really want to pay too much into the luxury tax anymore from the Warriors after Lacob's comments that he got fined for about the luxury tax being not fair. it is what it is. So they got to deal with that now. And next season, you're looking at Andrew Wiggins versus Jordan Poole. Who do they want to pay? I listened to Keith Smith and Trevor Lane talk about that on the Front Office Pod, so make sure to check them out too. They're awesome. They're probably the best NBA people you can listen to on that type of stuff. So check them out. But Draymond Green, it's going to be weird to see if he gets that max contract, because that's a lot of money. I don't think Green's not on a max contract right now, unless I'm just completely uneducated, but he's not getting paid max money at this point in his career. He's obviously important to a championship team, but do you want to give him max money on a team that's already so deep into the luxury tax? It's crazy to think about Green in a jersey other than Golden State's, even though, he even said on JJ Redick's podcast, I almost signed in Boston, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting and crazy to think about him anywhere but in Golden State. The question is, what other team would be willing to give him a max deal, though, right? And not only that, what team would have enough money that's a fit for Green next year to give him that deal? Like, you look at teams like, the Portland Trail Blazers, who need some defense and have a solid core around them. They're not going to have the money to give him a max deal. You look at, the Miami Heat, who need a power forward. They're not going to have enough money to give him a max deal. It'd have to be like the Knicks, I guess, if you wanted to go to New York. If they made the Mitchell trade, they made the Westbrook trade, they had money next year. But at that point, again, are they going to spend their max contract slot on Draymond Green? Maybe. Would that make him a title contender? I doubt it. So whether or not, if Green gets a max contract, it's going to be from the Warriors. But then the question becomes, are the Warriors willing to give him a max contract? And with Jordan Poole in need of an extension soon, with Andrew Wiggins in need of an extension soon, they might even have to decide between those two. It's hard to imagine Draymond Green getting that max deal. Will that create a rift that makes him leave Golden State? I find that hard to believe. But it's definitely an interesting situation to monitor over the next year or so. So keep an eye on that. That wraps up all the main topics I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to move into a segment I briefly named Jack's Corner. That's a terrible name. Jack's Junction, I also floated around. Essentially, it's just 5 to 10 minutes of me rambling about a topic that I'm excited about. Simone's Showdown, I don't know. We can figure out titles for it later, but I want to talk about the Indiana Pacers, because as under the radar as they've flown, they are what I expect to be one of the teams I want to pay attention to most next year. Currently, I write for Heavy.com, Celtics blog, At the Hive, Hoops Habit, and the Enjoy Basketball newsletter. So my main focus is the Celtics, obviously the Hornets up there as well, and then teams like the Bulls, Mavericks, and Knicks, which I write about intermittently for Heavy. But in terms of my enjoyment of the game of basketball, the Indiana Pacers are the team that I want to watch. And the main part of that is Tyrese Halliburton, right? You look around the league, I don't think there's a more entertaining point guard to watch than Tyrese Halliburton right now. He is the perfect mix of the traditional point guard of Chris Paul and the excitement of the athletic shooting point guard that dominates headlines in the NBA today. He's not John Morant. He's not Russell Westbrook. He's not Steph Curry. But he is his own form of entertainment, and it's kind of rare to see that blend in today's game nowadays, right? Like, he's athletic enough to get up there, make some fun highlight dunks. He's got the passing vision to make some of these Chris Paul-esque dimes and assists, and he's got the, as weird as it is to say, 40% three-point shooter, right? He's got a funky jump shot. It looks so weird coming out of his hand, but it goes in, and so you can't really question him. So with him leading the way in Indiana, and with the potential that Buddy Hield and Miles Turner will be off the roster, even if they don't go to LA, I feel like they'll probably be traded by at least the trade deadline next year for picks or other players in a deal somewhere to a contender. You're looking at a fun, young core on the Pacers around Tyrese Halliburton, right? Like, my personal favorite other player outside of Halliburton on the roster is Isaiah Jackson. I think what he showed on the Pacers last year with his athleticism, with his shot blocking, with his ability to be a vertical floor spacer and a lob threat, if he gets the starting position and he gets the minutes that I think he deserves, if Miles Turner is traded, I think he could emerge into a Robert Williams-esque player. I don't think he'll be as good as Robert Williams right away. I don't know if he ever will be, but he has that sort of game. And next to an elite point guard like Halliburton, I think he could flourish. I just think he needs the minutes to do so. And then outside of Jackson, you still have a ton of promise at the guard and the wing position. I guess you could like guard/wings. Benedict Mathurin, their rookie who they took this year. Ben Mathurin. I always mess up his last name. Benedict Mathurin. You have Chris Duarte. They just got Aaron Nesmith in a trade. And then O'Shea Brissett is still there. And then they've got some decent big men as well they could develop alongside Isaiah Jackson, who's just my favorite. Goga Batadze. Apologies if I said that wrong as well. Jalen Smith, who they just signed to a new deal, who looked really good in the games he played with them last season after being traded. And then Terry Taylor, who I love to watch Terry Taylor. I think a lineup of Halliburton, Terry Taylor, Isaiah Jackson. It might not be the best three-point lineup with spacing in that front court, but I think it would be super fun. He just does all the little things. He's going to have a long NBA career. Terry Taylor is a player to watch. If you like watching hard-nosed basketball, the guys that give it their all on the court, I'm talking Grant Williams, I'm talking PJ Tucker, Jared Vanderbilt. Terry Taylor is the next version of that. He doesn't have a three-point shot down just yet, but he is the next version of that. Please keep an eye on him. He's super fun to watch. And then, like I said, that wing threesome of Chris Duarte, Aaron Nesmith, and Benedict Mathurin should be fun to watch as well. Mathurin showed some potential in the Summer League. Chris Duarte played, I think, one Summer League game. But he's old enough where he doesn't need to. He's going to be good. Nesmith just got traded from the Celtics. He didn't pan out in Boston, but we've seen guys who haven't played well in certain places really flourish in other places. Like you look at Malik Monk after he went to the Lakers, he played well. You look at Max Strus after he bounced around from Boston to Chicago, thrived in Miami. Even Javonte Green finding a niche role in Chicago after leaving Boston, he played well. So, you've got a good squad in Indiana. Andrew Nembhard just signed a deal with them too. In Indiana watch. They're one of my sneaky fun teams to watch next year. I wrote about that for Enjoy Basketball. Check out the newsletter too. So that's, I guess, again, Jack's Corner. It's a terrible name, but basically just saying watch the Pacers next year. They're going to be fun. Halliburton and that crew. Isaiah Jackson too. Terry Taylor. They're awesome. They're really fun. But I think that's going to wrap it up for me. The Simone's NBA Show, or Simone NBA Show. We're working on stuff right now. But like I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check us out on TikTok. Subscribe there if that's where you're watching. Jack Simone NBA on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube, everywhere right now, on Instagram. That's where we're at. Jack Simone NBA, at Jack Simone NBA, JackSimone NBA. That was really fast. Check out the From the Rafters Celtics podcast. Me and Sam LaFrance do that. That's a fun one. Diving just solely into Celtics rather than the entire NBA. That's on the Bannertown USA YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. Again, the From the Rafters podcast. Check out my work at heavy.com, at Celtics blog, at The Hive, the Enjoy Basketball newsletter, and at Hoops Habit. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to me ramble about the NBA. Gonna try to make this a regular thing. I appreciate you guys all for listening and or watching wherever you are. Subscribe to the YouTube. Check out everything: Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. Sorry, leave 5 stars, leave a review, leave 1 star if you thought I was if I thought it was awful. But thank you, appreciate you all. See you guys next time. Peace out.